Welcome to the English Pod YouTube channel. On today's Two Peas in a Pod episode, your favorite Learning English podcast, we have a very special guest with us. McGill graduate, born and raised in Montreal, Val. Val, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So guys, before we start this podcast, we just want to say if you like it, please like and subscribe so we can continue to make these podcasts for you. During the podcast, there will be some slides that pop up on the screen to help you learn English, to help you understand what we're saying, to help you understand some of the concepts, some of the reasons why we use the sentences that we use. And in fact, if you want to be on the podcast, comment down below because we're going to have remote guests who are learning English eventually on the show. So, Val, in fact, your first language isn't English.
Yeah, my first language is not English, it is French. Since I come from Montreal, Quebec, that is a city and a province that is mainly francophone. Let's not forget that Quebec and Montreal are in a bilingual country, that is Canada. But Montreal, even though Montreal is bilingual and you have the two communities, the Anglophones and the Francophones, and also the allophones that came later with immigration, French remained the predominant language, and Montreal, in fact, is the second most populated city right after Paris, outside of Paris.
That speaks French.
Yeah.
Wow. So, was it challenging for you at all to learn English?
I started learning English at a very young age. My parents, being both of them francophones, decided to put me in English kindergarten. However, I didn't talk for a few years and I did the rest of my education, so elementary school, high school, and then we have what we call CEGEP in our education
College, yeah.
College.
Before university, though.
Exactly. I did all of my education in French, having also all of my friends, my neighbors that were francophones. It was kind of the only environment that I really knew and that I was really familiar with.
And then you went to an English university, McGill, the prestigious McGill University in Montreal, where you studied political science in English.
Exactly. Well, at a certain point, when it was time to choose university, I decided to go and choose English to get better, and it's a great asset to speak English, and it was to me it was. I couldn't conceive the fact that I was Canadian. I couldn't be very fluent in English. So I decided to apply to that university, luckily got accepted, and it was a big challenge to switch from a francophone system to an English system, going to your classes in English, listening to the professor speak in English. That wasn't much of a challenge to listen, but more to write text or to study in English, learn everything by heart in English was kind of a big challenge, let's say.
And having most of your fellow classmates who are mother tongue English, right? And so it's difficult to sort of keep up with that pace when you're working in your second language.
Yeah, and I was a little bit intimidated and scared in the beginning because I thought that I would be one of the only ones that had such a poor English level, exactly. Yeah. But luckily, there were a lot of international students as well that had accents, and I found out that it wasn't a problem to have an accent. Yeah. And
was it something that bothered you before, having an accent?
It did bother me, and it did bother me only maybe once or twice in university. I remember there's a student that made fun of me because of my accent, because as you can see, there's a little French influence in my accent, but I got bothered only once from a comment. But other than that, since the other students, most of the students were international students, they mostly have an accent, and it really gave me confidence and also to speak out loud and don't be scared to make mistakes. That really helped me. And if I have an advice to give to the listeners, is to never be scared to make some mistakes, because that's the way that you're gonna learn. You're not gonna learn if you think that you know the language when you don't know it. So
for sure. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about your city, your hometown, Montreal. Give the listeners a bit of an introduction to Montreal.
So, like I said before, Montreal is the most populated city outside of Paris and France in general. It is a city, well, the first...
Most populated city that speaks French.
Exactly. It is, well, before French colonizers, there were the First Nations that were living there. So the French settlers settled in 1642. And then a few centuries later, the English came. And after a few decades, we saw different waves of immigration coming in the city. So Irish, Scottish, Jewish, Eastern Europe countries, also a lot of Chinese, Italians, Portuguese, Greeks. And in the 80s, the 70s and the 80s, we saw also people coming from Haiti, coming from the Middle East, coming from Lebanon, coming from the Maghreb region. So, and today it's a very multicultural city that has this bilingual characteristic.
Cool. And so if you listeners have, I don't know, if you live in countries where you speak 2 languages or more, please comment down below. We'd love to know about it. And switching gears again, let's talk a bit about the food culture in Montreal. I know that there's a lot of different cultural influences with food in Montreal, as Val mentioned. But what are some of the traditional dishes?
So we have, let's say we have three local dishes that we have. Well, the first one is not from Montreal exactly. The first one comes from Drummondville, a little town in the province of Quebec. It's called Poutine, and basically it's French fries with gravy, kind of a gravy that is, we call it the Poutine Sauce. So it's kind of a gravy that we put on top, and a special kind of cheese that is really typical from where we come from. And
cheese curds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we put that on the fries and the gravy, and with the heat of the fries and the gravy, well, basically the cheese melts, and it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's a heavy dish, but it's great to have once in a while.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it's fast food. I won't say it's the most healthy food that you can have, but it's great, and it has become a very popular dish in Montreal and Quebec.
It's even become more of a fancy food in that you can add different stuff into the poutine. It's become even more gourmet as of late.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of not only big chains that do big chains, that took the poutine and reinvented it, but also very it has become also I guess a gastronomic plate in some other cases. So
yeah. And what are some places the visitors maybe could visit to eat some poutine in Montreal?
You can go wherever, maybe like the fast foods, even McDonald's.
Yeah, even McDonald's. But what are some Montreal places?
Well, Montreal places, I'd say that there are 2 main places that if you come and visit Montreal, I'd recommend those 2 places. So the first one would be La Banquise, that is located in a very hype the most hyped neighborhood in Montreal, that is Le Plateau Mont-Royal, where basically all the artists live and is very artistically alive. So in La Banquise, I would say is the number 1 in Montreal.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that, because I got food poisoning once from La Banquise, and another time I didn't feel too well after that. So I'm not in love with it like Val is, but it's supposed to be a good place. I haven't had good experiences there.
Well, I only had good experiences, so I'm very sorry if you had a bad experience.
And what's another place?
Another place that I would say Montreal, for La Banquise they have one location. Well, from what I know, they have one location. The other one is Poutineville, that have several locations in Montreal, and there's kind of a competition between the two places.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that the best poutine is in Montreal. I mean, the best poutine that I ever had was outside of Montreal in a little small town outside.
In Quebec. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
But Quebec is the province. It's the province where the city is located, Montreal.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Montreal, like you said, there's a blend of cultures and a lot of English and French being spoken. When you go out into the regions, it's more just French.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking about competition between Poutineville and La Banquise, we also have some competition with smoked meat in Montreal.
Yeah, well, smoked meat is another typical dish from Montreal. Well, that has been developed in Montreal. It came along with Jewish immigration. We had a lot of Jewish immigration in Montreal, and basically it's like it says it's a smoked meat.
Smoked meat sandwich.
Sandwich, yeah. That is put in, like, you put slices of the smoked meat in bread.
Yeah.
That is
rye bread.
Exactly, very very typical bread and special bread, and it comes. Well, you can put in like on the slice of the bread, you can put some mustard. Yeah. Usually, you put some mustard. You can put some ketchup. And
I wouldn't put ketchup. Val likes her ketchup on it, but I don't. I just enjoy mustard.
Yeah, well, mustard is very good as well.
But I guess it's up to personal preferences.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And right on the side, well, you can have some French fries. You can have some pickles. Usually, pickles are very
great Jewish pickles, right?
Yeah. And let's say we have one main place in Montreal that we call that is called Schwartz. That's the place to go. However, right across the street, there's another restaurant that is called Main Deli.
Main Deli, yeah.
That does this exact same thing. So smoked meat, they're specialized in that kind of dish.
And a lot of people actually prefer Maine. One example that comes to mind is Leonard Cohen.
Yeah, well, Leonard Cohen, I don't know if our listeners have heard about this great poet, singer, and musician. That is a Montrealer, born and raised in Montreal. And after his death, we heard and we learned that his favorite smoked meat wasn't Schwartz. That is the place that is preferred by Montrealers, but instead it was Main Deli.
Yeah, and they're actually right across the street from each other.
Yeah,
on St-Laurent Boulevard.
Exactly. Well, St-Laurent Boulevard, and I think, Professor Monty, if you allow me, I'd like to talk about St-Laurent Boulevard.
Go ahead.
Montreal is an island. We haven't mentioned that before. Yeah. Montreal is an island in the middle of the St. Lawrence River. The St. Lawrence River, well, from one side it continues and it goes to the Great Lakes. On the other side, well, it basically the river expands itself and it throws itself into the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, it opens up into the Atlantic.
Exactly.
Right?
So Montreal is this island that has a kind of a triangular form.
Triangular form.
Exactly. And right in the middle, the city is separated by one main boulevard. Yeah. So it separates east to west. The main boulevard is St-Laurent Boulevard, St. Lawrence Boulevard, that we also call the Main.
That's interesting. And then you have Main Deli with the smoked meat sandwiches.
Well, it's located on the same street, so that's why. And the Main, La Main in French, separates the city into west and east. The West being the Anglophone, it was mostly, now it has changed. I mean, Montreal is a melting pot, but we still see some traces of Anglophone settlements.
Yeah.
And the East being mostly Francophone.
Yeah. Where you have Saint Denis Street, where it really starts to be really French.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the Main is very important because not only it separates the island, but also it goes from one side to the other. So it goes from
St-Laurent Boulevard, she means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I said the river?
No, you said Maine, but I just want to make sure they know not Maine Deli.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, you're right, Professor Monty. So the city, basically, well, it goes from north to south. Or south to north, let's say. The southern part being the old port of Montreal.
Yeah. So what's the old port?
Well, I think I'm gonna talk about this later. Just to say that the importance of the Main, it goes from north to the south to north. South being where there's the old port, and we're gonna talk about it later. And it goes up to the north, and basically during the different settlements of immigration, while the boats would pass by St. Lawrence River, arrive at the old port, and we can see on the Main, if you go from south to north and you walk down this boulevard, you can see the settlements of different waves of immigration. Yeah. So you'll see close to the old port, there's the Irish neighborhoods, Griffintown, the first Irish settlements. Then you see Chinatown, because we had a huge Chinese immigration to Montreal. Then you see the Jewish neighborhood. Yeah. So that's where we have the Main, basically. And then you'll have the Italians, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Italians, the Greeks, and so on.
Yeah, they're a cultural melting pot.
Exactly.
Yeah, so one more thing with regards to food, the Montreal Bagel.
Oh yeah, well, Montreal is known for its bagel, for
its bagels. Yeah.
Exactly. We have well, that's also, it also came with Jewish immigration, because it's a Jewish tradition. And we have two main places that also hear that there's kind of a competition between...
Always competition.
Exactly. In Montreal, no. Well, we have the first one being St-Viateur Bagel.
Yeah, my favorite.
My favorite as well. They have pretty good bagels there, and you just...
Pretty good. Amazing.
You go there, you enter, and they're fresh.
Yeah, and they go into this wood-burning oven, and it's amazing. And I remember going there as a kid, and even seeing my younger brother, sometimes they just pull one out and right out of the oven, give it to a kid, even for free. It happened to me. I know it hasn't happened to you.
No, never.
No? Okay. But we were the lucky ones. But yeah, and then you eat it, and right on the spot. It's so good, you don't even need to put anything on it if you don't want to. You can, but it's that good. I know you have a story about going to St-Viateur with your dad.
Oh, well, so many great moments, Prof. Monty. Since St-Viateur Bagel it's very close to downtown, and when we'd go do a car ride with my family downtown once in a while, and we would go back home, on our way back home, my dad sometimes would say, well, do you want to stop by St-Viateur Bagels, and we're going to take some bagels and bring them home. So it was always a great moment, a moment that sparked excitement to my whole family. And we'd go there, buy a dozen of bagels, and the time that we would go back home, there weren't any bagels left.
Yeah, they were all eaten.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what's the other place, just so the listeners know?
There's another place called Fairmount Bagel.
Yeah. Also very good.
Very good as well. But like we said, we have our preferences.
Yeah. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about, you wanted to talk about Old Montreal. What's Old Montreal?
So Old Montreal, like I said before, Montreal was first of all, let's not forget that I want our listeners to know that the importance of the First Nations and the first people that lived in Canada.
Yeah.
And
the Aboriginal First Nations people.
Exactly. And in 1642, the first French settlers come to Montreal. And basically, they go in the old part of Montreal. They put the flag. They put at the time, I think they put a cross, if I remember well, a flag of the French flag of a cross, and they established their little colony. And until today, you see the influence of French architecture. And it's like a small little, like I said, small little village that has this French influence. So you can walk in this part of Montreal and feel totally like as if you've been you were in France in a small little French village.
Yeah, just to reiterate, so the listeners know, the French from France came and they conquered the land, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they settled there. Before settling to Montreal, they settled to other parts of the province.
Yeah, they settled in other parts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And well, basically, to come back to Old Montreal, it has this beautiful charm. It's absolutely amazing. You could feel, if you're interested in visiting Montreal, well, you'd feel totally as if you were in France, in a small village in France. And the particularity of Montreal is that there's this combination of the old and the modern, because right next to it you have downtown Montreal.
Yeah, north of the old port, Old Montreal. Mm-hmm. And in Old Montreal you have Notre-Dame Basilica.
Oh yeah, you have different places to go, but maybe my coup de coeur, my favorite place is Notre-Dame Basilica, that was inspired by Notre-Dame Basilica in Paris.
Yeah.
And it's
where tragic events have just recently happened, right? So
yeah.
But that was inspired by the Notre-Dame Church in Paris, and there's one it's a lot like the one in Paris in Montreal.
Yeah, from the outside it's a lot like it. Well, you have the two big columns. It's not as big, but the facade is pretty similar. It's not a copy at all, but it's a similar style, and it's inside it has beautiful colors, and it's a jewel of Montreal, of the old port, that's for sure. And today you can still celebrate masses there. There are some funerals of politicians, of personalities, and just for your curiosity, while Celine Dion got married in that church. So yeah.
And so did your parents.
And so did my parents, but in the chapel in the back.
But yeah, they're not as famous.
No, exactly. You need to be a privileged person, I guess.
But so there's another very famous church called St. Joseph's Oratory on Mont-Royal, the mountain in Montreal.
Exactly. So we wouldn't think that we have those big monuments in North America and Canada, but because usually you find them in Europe and other places of the world. But actually, there's the St. Joseph Oratory that is very beautiful, and that is located on the Mont-Royal, because another particularity of Montreal is that there's a mountain that is in the center, in the middle of the city, in the middle of the island. There's little mountain. It's not the Everest. I mean, it's not
Mount Everest.
Exactly. It's not a huge mountain. It's a little hill. Let's say it's a little hill, but we call it mount. We can't call it mountain. We say that it's
Mount
a mountain.
Royal. In English, you'd say Mount Royal, yeah.
And Mont-Royal is absolutely beautiful because it's a green space in which a lot of people go with the family. There's a lake in the middle, like on top of the mountain.
Yeah, so you can hike up
Yeah.
right? You can walk up and you can, what can you do at the top?
Well, at the top you have the view of the city, view
Yeah.
of downtown Montreal.
Beautiful, beautiful.
It's absolutely beautiful. I studied, and my university was right next to it. And when
Yeah.
I wanted to escape, sometimes I just go in the mountain and climb climb. That's a big word, climb the mountain, but go in the steps and look at the city and look at this panoramic view. It's absolutely beautiful. It's called the Belvedere.
Ah, in French, yeah.
Exactly.
And at the top of the mountain, you can also have people playing music as well.
Oh yeah, there's a beautiful atmosphere in summer, and in winter you'd see people doing some cross country skiing, people skating as
Because
well.
it's cold in Montreal.
Yeah, very cold.
In winter.
In winter, it's very cold. We can have some days where we hit the -40.
Yeah, hit -40. Yeah, yeah, which is cold. I'm sure for some of our listeners, it doesn't get below -5 or even 0. But yeah, just it's amazing to me how in Montreal you have all these different historical let's say attractions, but you also have a lot of new cool stuff, new festivals that happen every year.
Yeah, Professor Monty, I'd say that Montreal has this charm because it's an old city. You have the old port, but you have a lot of modernity in the city. And I'd say that Montreal is a giant playground. It's a city. It's a city where you can be an eternal child and you never grow up, basically.
Yeah. So what are some of the festivals our listeners can go to?
Well, there are more than 50, 60 festivals in Montreal every
Really?
year. And those festivals, they're all year long. So we can say during the summer, spring, even -40, we have festivals. We have the jazz festival, the International Jazz Festival, that is the most important jazz festival in the world. We have the Francophonie, that is for where French francophone singers come, and the most famous in the world. We have Osheaga, that has become very popular in the recent years.
What's Osheaga?
So Osheaga is a festival, very nice festival, where you can go and you have all of your favorite singers, the most famous singers of the recent years that participate every year. And it's a 3 days festival. And you go there, and you can have a 1-day pass or a 3-day pass. And I tell you, we received so many great singers and musicians and bands in the last few years. So there's this festival. And what else? I could talk about Igloofest. Igloofest is another.
What's an igloo?
An igloo is a house made of ice.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when you travel and you say you come from Canada, they're like, "Oh, do you live in igloos?" Well, it's absolutely not true. It's a big stereotype, and
maybe up north in Canada, you have maybe some igloos for different, but people don't live in igloos. No, that's not true.
Not at all. But yeah, basically we have this, to come back to the festival topic, we have this Igloofest festival that is in January and February, some weekends in those 2 months. And you have electronic music, you have pop music and DJs. A lot of DJs, international DJs come, and it's very nice. So you go, basically, it's even if it's -40, you put your snow pants on and you go and you have fun. So that's what I said. So you can be an eternal child in Montreal because it's a giant playground.
Yeah, nice. So it was such a pleasure having you on the show. I know we wanted to talk about the expo and the Olympics in Montreal and some of the history, but we're going to have you back on the show because our time is up. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Professor Monty. It was a pleasure to share about this city.
All right, so you listeners out there, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, because it will help to make more podcasts like this for you, to help you learn English, to help you listen to English, to help your oral skills ameliorate, to help your oral skills get better. So please subscribe, comment below if you want to be a guest on the podcast like Val here, because I want to have people whose first language maybe isn't English. So it's more interesting for you guys. Okay, so please, again, subscribe. Have a good day. God bless. See you next time.